Welcome, everyone. We're here to talk about a really important topic, understanding sexual harassment. The goal today is to give everyone a solid, foundational understanding of this issue under U.S. law. Why? So we can all recognize, prevent, and respond to it effectively. This is all about making sure we maintain a workplace that's professional, safe, and respectful for every single person here. This isn't just about checking a box on a policy, it's about our culture. So let's get started.
To really get a sense of why this training is so critical, let's just look at this number. The U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that's the EEOC, the federal agency that enforces our workplace discrimination laws, they track this stuff. And back in 2015, they received nearly 28,000 harassment charges. 28,000. That number really shows that this isn't some rare, isolated problem. It's a persistent issue across the country that needs our full attention.
And that brings us to the absolute heart of the matter. The best way to combat harassment is to stop it before it even starts. And prevention, well, it begins with all of us having a clear, shared understanding of what it is. That's exactly what this training is designed to do, to give each of us that clarity, so we're all empowered to spot and address conduct that crosses the line. So to build that understanding, we've got to start with the foundation, the legal standard. Now, don't worry, you don't need to be a lawyer or memorize a bunch of legal codes. We're just going to focus on the key principles that define what is and what isn't okay in a professional setting.
So, what is sexual harassment, legally speaking? Well, under federal law, specifically Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, it's considered a form of sex discrimination. The definition really hinges on one critical word: unwelcome. For conduct to be considered harassment, it has to be unsolicited and seen as undesirable or offensive by the person on the receiving end. This can be anything from unwelcome sexual advances and requests for dates or favors to other kinds of verbal or physical behavior that's sexual in nature.
Now, the law breaks this behavior down into two main categories. It's really important to understand both of them because they cover different kinds of situations. Let's take a look at each one. Okay, first on the left, you'll see quid pro quo. It's a Latin phrase that literally means this for that, and that's exactly what it is. This happens when a job benefit, we're talking a promotion, a raise, maybe even just keeping your job, is made dependent on an employee putting up with unwelcome sexual advances. It's a blatant abuse of power. Then on the right, we have hostile work environment. This is when unwelcome conduct is so severe or so pervasive that it just changes the whole vibe of the workplace, creating an environment that feels intimidating, hostile, or just plain offensive. And a key point here on severe or pervasive, it doesn't always have to be a pattern. A single really serious incident can be enough to create a hostile work environment.
All right, so now that we've got the two legal categories down, let's get a little more specific. What does this misconduct actually look like in the real world? Well, harassing behavior can show up in a few different ways.
First up, there's verbal misconduct. This isn't just about someone directly asking for a date. It can be spreading sexual rumors, making graphic comments about someone's body, using degrading sexually charged words, or telling off-color or explicit jokes. Again, the key here is that the comments are sexual and they are unwelcome. Next, there's physical misconduct. This is any kind of unwelcome physical contact. It could be inappropriate touching of a person or even their clothing. It could be physically blocking someone's path, or, in the most serious cases, it could be assault. Harassment can also be visual. We're talking about displaying sexually suggestive posters, pictures, or cartoons. And it doesn't matter if it's on a computer screen, a phone that's being passed around, or pinned up in a break room. If it's in the workplace, it can contribute to a hostile environment.
And of course, in our digital world, this definitely extends to digital misconduct. So let's imagine an employee, we'll call her Jill Jones, starts texting her coworkers sexually explicit jokes and pictures. Even if she's using her personal phone outside of work hours, if that behavior spills over and negatively impacts the work environment, it can absolutely be considered harassment. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Some of this can feel a little subjective, right? What one person thinks is a harmless joke, someone else might find deeply offensive. So how does anyone make a judgment call on this? Well, the legal system actually has a specific way of looking at it.
So that's the big question, isn't it? How is offensive behavior actually determined? Is it based on the person who said it, the person who heard it, or is there another standard? And the answer is something called the reasonable person standard. This is a really critical concept to grasp. Under this standard, it's not about the harasser's intent. It doesn't matter if they thought it was just a joke. What matters is the impact of the behavior. The EEOC and the courts look at everything, the whole context, and all the circumstances, and they ask, would a reasonable person in that same situation find the conduct hostile or abusive? This makes the standard objective, not subjective.
It's also really important we bust a common myth about who can be involved in harassment. This is not just a manager-to-employee issue. A harasser can be anyone, a supervisor, a coworker, even a client, a customer, or a vendor. Harassment can happen between people of the same sex or the opposite sex. And crucially, the victim isn't always the person being directly targeted. Anyone who witnesses the behavior and is affected by the hostile environment it creates can also be considered a victim.
And that idea that this affects more than just one person leads us to our final and maybe our most important section. Harassment doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It creates a ripple effect that can harm individuals and, frankly, the entire organization.
For the person being targeted, the toll can be absolutely devastating. It can lead to serious mental and physical health problems like anxiety and depression. It crushes morale and job satisfaction. And it can cause real, long-term damage to someone's professional reputation and their career.
And for the organization, the consequences are just as severe. A workplace that allows harassment sees higher turnover, has a harder time recruiting good people, and suffers major damage to its reputation. And that's all on top of lost productivity and the very real possibility of big legal fees and fines. A toxic culture is a direct threat to the health of the business, plain and simple.
So, what's the big takeaway here? I think this quote from an EEOC task force report says it best. The real goal isn't just to follow the letter of the law, it's to build a holistic culture of non-harassment. And while that has to start with leadership, it's truly built and maintained by the daily actions of every single one of us. So the final question we should all ask ourselves is this: what part will I play in making sure our workplace stays professional, productive, and respectful for everyone?